Interested in Tinkercad? This little demo will cover all the basics. Hi, I'm James, and welcome to my little demo on Tinkercad. Tinkercad has tons of resources on its own website, but I thought I'd do just a little demo to cover all the basics. I think as a 3D modeling program, Tinkercad doesn't really get the respect it deserves. I know it is used even in grade school projects, but it certainly has a lot more power than people think. I think of it a lot like kind of digital Lego in a way, but you can make and alter your own blocks to build with. So particularly if you're not sure about 3D modeling and just want to give it a try and maybe try and 3D print something out from a quick little model that you make, I think this is the ideal software to get started with. So let's just jump in. Okay, so I've already gone to Tinkercad's website, created an account, and have obviously done this before. And I just opened a new 3D model to start working with. And Tinkercad will always give you a very unique name for everything that you work on. So I typically like to rename things as soon as I think of it, just to keep things organized well. So we're going to do a little Pinocchio head just as a demo. So I've named this one Pinocchio. And you can see it's a pretty basic 3D interface. You have a top bar of tools. You have a kind of a left bar of options, a lot relating to the view menu right here, and then different shapes that you're going to be working with over to the right. So let's just jump right in. I'll assume that you've maybe gone through just some basics and are familiar either with 3D modeling or have just played with Tinkercad a little bit. So to start off with the shapes, like I mentioned in the intro, it's sort of like Lego, so you can pick a shape. I'm going to start with a sphere, and you just click and drag, and we're going to kind of make this into a little bit of an oval head, so we can just stretch out. And one of the things that's important if you're not familiar with 3D modeling is to constantly be changing your view so that you can really get a sense of how you're working in 3D space. I think when we're making objects, we're used to that because we're constantly moving the objects around in our hands and moving our eyes around. But in this, you need to really be more conscious of it. So to get an accurate sense of what it is that you're drawing, you want to take these different views. So example from the front there, that looks like a decent profile. And then from the right as well, to make sure I haven't stretched it out in any sort of strange way. This is just your home view, so that'll always take you back right there. So that's the main head that we're going to be starting with. And next, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lock this form right here, just as I'm working on other things. Then I won't be altering this, and so it can just stay right there. So the next thing we'll do is the hat. So I'm going to make it a little cone with a brim. So again, we'll just click and drag a cone into the space, and then I'm going to go from the top view and show you how you can just sort of change those dimensions. So a lot of those typical keyboard shortcuts like Shift will make a uniform kind of scale. I'm holding Shift down now, or if you're not shifting, then you can sort of shape it in different ways. So again, I'm going to make that just sort of a little bit of an oval there, and look at it from the front and get it sort of in proportion for that head that it's going to be sitting on there. And if you want to zoom in just on the one that you're working on here, you have this second fit view, so we can zoom in right there. And then I'm just going to make it just a little bit skinnier. And then we can go back to that home view, and it's starting to look pretty good. And I'm going to make him have a red hat, so you can change your colors really easily there. Clicking on that, and then make a little brim for it, which is essentially going to be part of a cylinder. So just pick the cylinder, drag that out, look at it from the front, and I'm going to make it just drag it down and make it just sort of a short little brim, and look at it from the top, and then we're going to drag it over here. And again, if we click and drag a selection box around it, it's going to pick both of those objects. And again, we can zoom in there, and I can decide if I want the brim to stay as a circle. But if you have both objects selected, it'll scale them together. So So I'm just going to pick the bottom there, maybe just sort of stretch it out a little bit. Get a good looking brim on there like that. And I also want it to be red to match. So we've got that. And again, I'm going to check it from the front. Now that brim's still looking a little bit thick, so I'm just going to shrink it down just a little bit there. Oop, and I think I accidentally scaled it, so you can see how I made it a skinny oval based on the view that I had. So I'm going to go back to it and just stretch it out there. Again, we'll look at it from the front. You can see how the view that you're at will impact the type of scaling that you're doing. So right there. And again, anything that you're doing, always very easy to fix. You can go back to it, or you always have that undo button there that's typical in most software. And so we'll just go from and do an orthographic as opposed to the perspective, and that can give you straight on controls with different objects. So that's another way of looking at objects to work with them. And we're going to go back to that sort of home view. And another function that can be really worthwhile while you're working with multiple objects is grouping. So I'm going to click and drag a selection box and pick those two, and then I'm going to group them. And so now everything I do to this will act as a single object. So for me to position it on top of Pinocchio's little head there, we're going to look at it from the front. And when you click on it, this little arrow controls it moving straight up and down. So we're going to get it to approximately the right height. Look at it from the top to make sure we put it on top of his head, and check again from the front, see how that's looking. Kind of sitting a little bit high, so we'll put that a little bit lower, and be nice to have a little tilt to it. So you have these other control arrows for rotation, and if you hold down shift, it'll constrain it to a certain amount of rotation, or you can just free rotate. So we're going to just turn just a little bit there, and then move it kind of over so it's looking good. And again, with any positioning, you want to check from multiple views to make sure that it's where you think it is and looking good. And you can always go back to that sort of home view, and it'll give you the perspective view on things. I tend to work a little bit more with the orthographic views, and I'm just going to scoot it down just a touch there. So I think that's pretty decent looking. So we've got his hat on there. Okay, so let's give him some funny little eyeballs. And again, similar to how we've done these other forms, we're just going to go back to the basic shapes and bring out a sphere as one of his little eyeballs, and scale that puppy down to be around the right size. So again, I'm holding the shift key and uniformly scaling that down. And I'm going to just go from a front view and select all these to zoom in, and be careful when you have everything selected. Click off of it before you start working with any one object. So we've got this guy, and we're going to move him up to around the right height there. And another thing that you can do is, if you have a particular dimension in mind for when you're ultimately, if you're going to print this out, you can see these numbers that pop up, and so you can go in and type a particular size if that's helpful as well for scaling. So we've got that, and I'm going to go from the top view to make sure I don't put this into his head and lose it inside there. And so we've got that, and we'll just kind of move it here, look at it from the front, see if we're kind of positioning this about right. So looks good enough to me for just a quick little demo. So we have that, and then we're going to copy and paste it. So again, typical keyboard shortcuts on the Mac, you can just do the Command C and the Command V, and we've got another one. And then I'm just using the arrow key to just scooch it over in place. And so we've got some eyeballs there, and I'm just going to check it out from the side view and the top view. It's a little buggy, so I'm going to just move those back in there a little bit, just using the arrow keys. And again, we'll look from that home view and just from that and zoom in. And so I think that's good enough for now. And since Pinocchio was known for his lying, we're going to put some little pupils in there looking up to the sky. And so again, just to make these easier to see, like I changed the color with the hat, is you can just click on it. And let's just do little white eyeballs here. It's not going to matter in the final 3D print, but it's good enough for now. And again, we'll just drag out a little sphere, and I tend to work from the top on things. Now, it can be a little trickier when you get a lot smaller. I'm going to do that uniform scale. And so that may be where you'd want to go in and type in your numbers. But I'll look from the front, and we have this guy, and you're going to use that up arrow to get it to approximately the right height. You're going to look at it from the top again to make sure I'm not losing it inside of the body or anything like that. And look at it from the front. And we can take this, we're going to have him just looking up to the side just a little. So I've used that arrow there, and then using my keyboard arrows, kind of move it over. So I think that looks pretty good. We'll again check it from multiple views. And again, I think it's just a little bug-eyed. So we're just going to move them in just a touch. And that looks good to me. And just like we did with the eyeballs, we're going to select that and keyboard shortcut C and then V to copy it and paste it. And then I'm using the keyboard arrows to just scooch it over to keep it at the same height. And I think that's looking pretty good to me. And we're going to do a different operation here, which is in Tinkercad, they call it the hole function. And in a lot of other 2D and 3D programs, they call it Boolean operations, which is a way of like adding and subtracting geometric forms. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these to hollow out the eyeballs so that if we do 3D print this out, you actually see kind of a recess there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick that eyeball and then I'm going to turn it into a hole. Same over here. And then if you pick the pupil and click and hold the eyeball and group them, then that's going to actually subtract the forms. Right here's the group. And so then it may not look that different right now, but that's actually going to be a recessed hole in the 3D model and when it gets printed out. So we've done that, group that again, and then you can see that little hole in the sphere there. So we've got eyeballs with pupils ready to go. All right, now I think it's time to put a quirky little smile on the fella. And so we're going to use Tinkercad's scribble tool. So you just click on that and it's going to open up a different sort of work window for drawing. And you just have a basic kind of round brush and a pencil and an eraser. You can draw either lines or shapes in positive or negative. So I'm just clicking and holding, and it's a little tricky to draw on a trackpad, but we'll just do our best there, and that'll kind of work. And just to give you a little bit of a sense, you can undo each function and redraw pretty easily if you like. And then also you can go in with an eraser and refine some of your lines if you like. And obviously I find drawing in a vector-based program like Illustrator a lot more refined and controlled, and I have another video where I'll address importing SVGs from vector drawing programs like Illustrator. But for now, for this demo, I think that's just fine. And you can see how it's going to come out as just basically an extruded drawing. So I'm done. I guess that's good enough. So there we are. And we'll make his little smile red as well. And to put it up on the face, we need to get into rotations. And so sometimes I'll put away the shapes panel just to give a little bit more room to work. And if you look at the whole kind of view here, we're going to have to rotate this smile so that it's in the proper orientation on the face. So I'm going to go from the this side menu here and rotate. Sometimes working with smaller objects can be a little tricky, so you might want to fit your view in there and then go in on these arrows, rotate that how I like, go back to the front view, and again going to the flat or orthographic views I find a little bit easier when I'm laying things out. And we can pick the head and shift click the head, the smile, and fit to that whole view. And we can move this up a little bit and over, and you can see it's a little bit big for his head, so I'm going to just shift and uniformly scale that down. Go back to the front view, and again kind of move him up just a touch and move him over there. Looking from the top view, we can see his mouth is floating out there in space, so we're going to bring it back in so it's fully kind of contacting the head there. Go to the front view and check from some side views, still sticking out a little bit further. So I'm going to use the arrow keys to kind of go in a bit more. Look from the front, from the other side. And again, just for quick little printout model, I think that's just fine. We don't have to get too fussy with it. And so we'll go overall view, go from the front, double check that we're pretty happy with how things are going, and that's good enough for me. All right, and last but not least, let's get a nose for our little Pinocchio here, and we're going to work with the paraboloid shape, which is basically just a rounded cone. So we'll just click and drag that over to the work plane, and holding the shift key down, just kind of uniformly scale it. And we want to kind of zoom in on that because working with some smaller objects can sometimes be a little tricky to get the right control handles on it. And let's take a front view and kind of get a long pointy nose for Pinocchio. And just like we did with the smile, we're going to have to rotate this. So let's look from the side, and we can free rotate it, or holding the shift button key down, we can constrain it to different 45-degree increments. So let's just have that straight out there, and maybe we want to make that just a little skinnier. And we certainly do need to bring it up in space, so let's look at it from the front. And using that up arrow to just get it approximately placed. And then from the top, it'll be easiest to kind of drag it over, and then we'll select all of it and zoom in again and see how that's placed. That looks okay to me. And he's looking, I know the color doesn't matter in the final 3D print, but I just can't help myself. So we're going to just color his nose, kind of maybe a pale wood color, and then same with his head shape, just so that's kind of matching, so he feels a little bit more like Pinocchio. And we'll just do a once around, and again with the nose, it's easy to sort of move it in space and it'll automatically merge in the print. So depending on how honest Pinocchio might be feeling any particular day, we can just position it as we need to. And let's just zoom out there and see if we're happy with everything. I might just have to futz with that mouth just a touch. And again, just for a quick little demo and maybe a printout model, I think that's just good enough for us. So hope you enjoyed this, and it gets you interested and excited to try out some things in Tinkercad. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.